Hello, beautiful people. My name is Emma.
And I'm MC.
And we're your hosts of the G Forces podcast. So, this weekend was Brazilian Grand Prix. It's been a long weekend.
It has. It's been a very dreary day. So.
But yeah, it was a Brazilian Grand Prix in Sao Paulo.
Yeah, it was, it never disappoints. Brazil's
it's always a good
exciting.
Race.
I think it's just a really difficult track. It's not one that the rookies have ever been at. I think that there's just like a higher risk of crash or like hitting into the boundaries, barriers. And then, yeah, the weather is pretty unpredictable. So,
yeah.
This year we had a wet track for some of the sessions during the weekend, but the race overall was pretty dry. I woke up this morning and I checked the weather, and it looked like it was just cloudy. So, yeah. I mean, last year brought craziness.
It was a huge difference from last year. Like, last year, I remember Ollie Behrman, like, literally saying on his radio, like, I'm just trying to make sure I live through this race.
And I think this weekend, though, brought its own level of insanity.
So, since we've been watching F1 for the last 3 years, each year something crazy, it feels like, has happened in Brazil. Like, in 2023... Correct? Yeah, 2023, it was the photo finish between Fernando and Checo. Mm-hmm. Last year, it was the insane rain. This year, some crazy things have happened.
Yeah.
So, and it was a sprint race, too.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, because it was a sprint race, we don't really have much for practice, but there's a lot that happens in, like, every other session. But we're gonna jump right into it.
So, the official race name for this weekend is the Formula 1 MSC Cruises Grand Premio de Sao Paulo 2025. So, the track name is the Autodromo Jose Carlos Pace, aka, like a lot of people refer to it as Interlagos. The first F1 Grand Prix was held in 1973. So, regarding the track, there are 15 turns on this track. The circuit length, I only have kilometers this week, guys. Sorry, I forgot to look up the miles. But the circuit length is 4.309 kilometers. And then the lap records for one lap around the circuit was placed in 2018 by Valtteri Bottas. He did that in a Mercedes, and he did that in 1 minute and 10 seconds, 10.540 seconds to be exact. So this year was surprising. I don't think I realized this watching the race, who had gotten the fastest lap.
Who?
But Alex Albon got the fastest lap this year.
Oh, yeah. No, I know.
Obviously doing it in a Williams, and you can just tell, like, I think the weather, there was a lot of wind this year. The lap record was, 2 seconds slower, so it was 1 minute and 12.400 seconds.
So he broke the lap record?
No, he didn't. He was 2 seconds slower.
Oh, I thought you were... I thought...
No. So Valtteri's is still in place. So the drivers are doing 71 laps around this circuit, and that comes out to a total distance of 305.879 kilometers. And then regarding the DRS zones, there are 2 this weekend. So DRS detection zone 1 is between turns 1 and 2. Activation begins after turn 3, and it continues in that straight going to turn 4. DRS detection zone 2 is between turns 13 and 14, and activation is after turn 14, and activation begins after turn 14 and ends at turn 1. So, kind of strange thinking that we're not going to have that section to go over next year because there's going to be no DRS. So.
Oh, right. They are.
Yeah.
They're fully getting rid of it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We'll see when they have to bring it back.
We'll see what happens.
So, I did just have a few things. I know Emma said we didn't have much to go over for practice, but I did just want to make note that Yuki did end up hitting the barrier pretty early on in the practice session, which caused quite a bit of damage. His car was being worked on for the majority of the time. And I think that was just like damage that would continue to affect the rest of his race weekend. So,
yeah.
Other than that, pretty quiet practice session.
Okay. Well, then we're going to get into sprint quali.
Yeah. So for the first session of sprint qualifying 1 or SQ1, Yuki was one of the first drivers to go out, especially as I said, he had lost so much time with his team doing repairs during practice. Everyone else got on the grid, and as the first laps got on the board, the McLarens were topping the charts. Lando would end up staying on top of the timesheets as the session was wrapping up, and Yuki seemed to struggle, understandably, when the car had to be rebuilt, like only a few hours prior. Carlos additionally also just seemed off this session, and I think he just had a lockup or messed up a bit of his lap, and he just wasn't able to really get a second one in.
Yeah.
And so knocked out of this session was Franco Colapinto, Liam Lawson, Yuki Tsunoda, Esteban Ocon, and Carlos Sainz. And one thing we didn't mention that I guess we can talk about more at the end, but Franco was just confirmed with Alpine that he'll be in that second seat for 2026. So for the second session, so Sprint Quali 2, Gabby was the first one out during this session. This is his home race. I feel like home races just tend to not...
They disappoint everyone.
Yeah, and they're just really sad.
Every time. It's really upsetting.
Fernando was an exciting name at the top of the charts for a bit during this session. I feel like he is at least trying. Like, I feel like he has really been trying to get into the points. Not always succeeding, but still. Charles and Lewis were also struggling during this first session, and that just like they struggled in the prior session, and it continued on into the second session. Charles was attempting to do a second final run, and he ended up having a spin out as people were finishing up their final laps, and so it would end up messing up a handful of drivers. He was able to get into the final session. He was able to move on to SQ3, but Lewis was not so lucky, just missing out, I think, getting like 11th. So knocked out of this session was Lewis Hamilton, Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, Gabby Bortoleto, and Ollie Behrman. Moving on to the final session of Sprint Quali, SQ3. This was a pretty standard clean session. It's a really busy weekend, and I feel like the goal is always to just try not to have massive repairs. Lando would continue to dominate alongside Oscar, who seemed to land just behind Lando. Ultimately, the Mercedes duo were able to split the McLarens, and Max wasn't able to find the speed that he needed. So the top 10 times were Lando in first, Kimi in second, Oscar in third, George in fourth. I think it might be the other way around. No, I might be right. Anyways, Fernando in fifth, Max in sixth, Lance in seventh, Charles in eighth, Isaac in ninth, and Nico Hülkenberg in 10th. So a little bit all over the place. Like, I feel like I was shocked to see Lance where he was.
Yeah.
Because I always forget about Lance Stroll. But yeah, that was the sprint.
Cool. We're gonna get into
sprint quali.
Yeah, now we're gonna get into the sprint race. This one was a doozy.
Like a lot happened, but a lot didn't happen. So
there's only like 20-something laps.
Yeah, I think 24. The sprint started off pretty clean. Like, honestly, that was the one thing about this, and I feel like the race, they both started pretty clean.
Well, the first couple laps of the sprint, I remember thinking to myself, I'm like cleaning dishes as I'm watching, and I'm like, wow, like we've never had a sprint race where like things are going well. Like there hasn't been a crash yet. I think I'm the reason why this all happened.
Well, apparently again, this is something that a lot of people have been complaining about with F1 TV and just the way it's been broadcasted, is that there's a lot of things that we've been missing, it feels like. There was contact further back between Ollie and Liam at one point in the beginning of the race, which would give Ollie and Liam a 5-second penalty later on. Unfortunately, like Emma said, the race took a downward turn pretty quickly. So Oscar ended up hitting the barriers on lap 6. He was the first car. There wasn't rain, but there was water on the track, and it looked like there was water that had been splashed from the curbs. Now, when we were watching, the pundits were pretty quick to be like, it looked like Lando's car hit the curb in a way that splashed it.
Well, and Kimi said that on the radio.
Kimi said the same thing. I think it's obviously just hazard of racing and being a wet track. So ultimately, that splash was what Oscar and then Franco and then Nico, or Nico and Franco, I can't remember which one was next. But basically 3 cars hit this puddle or hit this strip of rain and just went straight into the barriers. Oscar and Franco were out. They were out of their cars. Nico limped it back, and I don't know if he continued. I can't remember. I feel like he might have.
I think so.
But yeah. Franco's looked significantly worse than Oscar's, in my opinion. Like, it just looks like there was a lot more damage with Franco's, but
yeah.
Obviously not good. And with this ending Oscar's race, it created a larger gap for Lando.
Yeah.
So that happened on lap 6 of 24.
And it went into a red. At first, normally it's a safety car, but it went to a red flag.
It went to a red flag, and we both agreed that it actually made the race a lot more enjoyable, because I feel like with virtual safety cars and safety cars in general, it creates just this laps get eaten up and nothing happens.
Especially when a sprint race is only 20-something laps. It takes them 6-7 laps to get it cleaned up. Okay, that's half of the race.
Yeah. So for this to be a red flag, it was honestly refreshing. So, FIA, keep it up. This was a good decision.
Not what you... Anyways.
What?
The rest of your decisions this weekend were questionable.
Yeah. This is the only one that I was like, okay, this makes sense for the spectators. When the session resumed, it was a rolling start, which apparently Jolyon, I think, was shocked because of the level of safety that he felt it could have been a standing start, but rolling start regardless. Lando ended up having another really good launch. Fernando was in the point, showing a good run, but Charles began to put pressure on him, and then as the race came to the end, a few things ended up happening. So Lando's tires began to be a larger problem. From what I remember, when the red flags were lifted, he put softs onto his car. As we know, softs degrade faster, and so he ended up basically, the gap that he had between him and Kimi, who was behind him in second, ended up getting smaller and smaller. Now, he never did what we've been seeing recently, where there weren't 10 seconds between him and Kimi. There's just not enough laps, and with, a rolling start, you're just not going to get that gap.
Yeah.
But it ended up being a little over a second gap, which then Kimi ended up eating into. And so as we are getting to the final laps, Kimi is getting closer and closer. At one point, I think he was 0.4 of a second away from Lando. But then as the final laps approached, Gabby Bortoleto ended up hitting a patch of water, lost the car, and honestly had one of the more violent crashes we've seen this season, if not in a while.
It reminded me, honestly, of Lance Stroll's crash in Singapore a couple years ago.
Yeah, so the race ended up ending under a double yellow, so there wasn't really an opportunity for a larger battle. Now, would Kimi have gotten it?
I don't think so.
Say? I don't think so, but the Gabby Bortoleto crash was rough.
Yeah, you can see the video of his family reacting to it, and they all look pretty horrified, and he immediately said that he was okay, but I think it was something he ended up hitting the wall at like 67 Gs or something like that.
Yeah, it's one of the fastest points of the track where he hit.
Yeah.
So that was the sprint. So the top 8, which are the only people that score points because not as many do in a sprint, was Lando in first, Kimi in second, George in third, Max in fourth, Charles in fifth, Fernando in sixth, Lewis in seventh, and Pierre in eighth. So that was the sprint.
All right, and I'm going to get into Quali. Since there were some crashes earlier on in the day during the sprint race, people weren't sure if everyone's going to make it back out for qualifying.
Especially Gabby.
Yeah, and qualifying ended up actually getting delayed by a little bit because they needed to continue fixing a barrier, which I don't know why they weren't doing it in the several hours in between the sessions.
Maybe they were, who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. But they were working on that, so it was delayed by like a couple of minutes. It wasn't too much. But everyone actually made it out on track except for Gabby, and they ended up getting Gabby into the car like in the last couple minutes, but it wasn't enough time for him to actually get out of the garage, so he ended up not being able to put up a time for Q1. What else? Ollie was surprised with how good he was. He was doing really, really well. I feel like normally Ollie has really good race days, but his qualifying hasn't been the strongest. Typically, it feels like he's getting out in Q3, but then he's walking from like P17 all the way up to like P8 throughout the race. And I feel like that's been the story of his season. But it was nice to see that he was like topping the charts. He was doing that well. Max ended up being at risk and he was really struggling to get a faster lap. And then he said that he was struggling for grip apparently. So those who ended up getting out, this is crazy, were Max, Esteban, Franco, Yuki, and Gabby. This was the first time I think that Max has ever gotten out in Q1 his entire career. Barring like penalties or stuff like that.
Or so, like, I think his F1 career. I'm not sure about earlier formulas.
His F1 career. Yeah. So like this is the first time on merit that he just got
Which
out.
they just kept repeating over
I think
it
was just because it's crazy.
Yeah.
It blows my mind that he's never gone out in Q1 once any time before.
Yeah.
So that was crazy. And seeing like both Williams make it into Q2, but both Red Bulls out was very strange. Q2, there wasn't a ton that happened. George was reporting that he was struggling for grip throughout the session. Kimi seemed to be having a really great qualifying, like just an overall great weekend. I saw people online making jokes that like Kimi went to Senna's grave this past week and he like was blessed with greatness.
Oh my God.
And so that's why he's doing so well this weekend. And then Ollie repeated his speed from Q1 and topped, he didn't like top the session, but he was in like the top 3, which is pretty crazy. So those who ended up getting out were Alonso, Albon, Hamilton, Stroll, and Sainz. So both Williams, and then Lewis was just having a really hard weekend.
Yeah.
It wasn't for him.
Yeah.
And Ferrari was having a bad weekend.
Yeah.
So, again, sorry, Ferrari.
There's always next year.
Hopefully. So, in Q3, everybody goes out, does their normal first laps and everything, and Ollie ended up going to pretty close to the top again. But then in the last drive where everyone's doing their last lap, Ollie wasn't able to improve his time from his first run, so he actually dropped down the order. He ended up dropping down the order to 8th, I believe it was. So he started P8. What else? Charles on his last run jumped up to the top, but that didn't last long because Lando ended up jumping up to the front as well. And then Oscar, he did better than his first run, but not enough to move him up. So he ended up in P4, which still wasn't bad, but not really what Oscar needed. I think he definitely was hoping for a P1. So the order of Q3. P1 was Lando, P2 Kimi, P3 Charles, P4 Oscar, P5 Isaac, P6 George, P7 Liam, P8 Ollie, P9 Pierre, and then P10 Nico. Pierre was having a pretty decent weekend for himself.
Yeah, I was shocked by the performance of the Alpine.
I think it's the first time. I think it's their best weekend in like 3 months or something like that. For him, at least.
They need it. They definitely need it.
I don't understand that team.
I feel like that team, if anything, is like a social experiment at this point because they're just very confusing. I don't understand their structure. I feel like they're not really relevant. Like them and Aston Martin just don't really seem like they're bringing
never have
anything.
any idea what's going on with them. Yeah, it doesn't feel like they're bringing anything to the community.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think it's strange that there was all these like celebrity investors and then there's just been nothing this year. I do think it's never been like publicly disclosed.
I feel like those celebrity investors are probably not investing anymore, and that's the issue.
Well, anyways.
Because, I mean, last year Ryan Reynolds went to like a bunch of the races.
Yeah.
And literally not one peep.
Who knows? Maybe they sold their stakes or I don't know how any of that works.
But. Yeah, neither do I. All right, we are going to get into the actual race. Max and Esteban ended up both starting from the pit lane, which wasn't that big of a deal since both of them were starting in the last 5 anyways. Max ended up getting a new power unit and he went over his limit, so that's why he was starting in the pit lane. And then Esteban got a new internal combustion engine, or ICE for short, so that is why he ended up starting from the pit lane. Off the start, Lando actually had a really great launch. So I feel like sometimes Lando's starts were like his weakest point last year, but I do think that this was a really good. I think he's gotten a lot better at them.
Yeah, I think that was one thing that we noted with the sprint was that his sprints were like the starts this past weekend were stronger, and I think you saw that. I wonder if. One, I mean, he's probably just naturally improving, as with the experience, but I also wonder if this is not as like an insult, but I wonder if like the pressure of Max is different than the pressure of Kimi behind you, right? Like I wonder if it's just like a different headspace, like a bit more confidence and
Well, I saw somebody actually talk about this on TikTok where Lando last year was very frantic towards the end of like, where's Max? Where's Max?
Yeah.
Like, where this year he's not really worried as much where the other people are. He's just focusing on his drive, which I think makes a big impact on his performance.
Well, and he's made mention in interviews a lot of like, I have to ignore the haters, ignore the negativity. So it does seem like, I mean, obviously growth, maturity. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Oscar and Isaac are battling for a good bit at the beginning, which was a little nerve-wracking. And then pretty quickly, in the first lap, we see, unfortunately, Gabby crash into turn 10. It wasn't like a bad crash at all compared to the one he had yesterday, but it was enough for a DNF.
Yeah.
Which was just devastating.
Yeah, you could just see his, like, I think his mom or someone in his family had their head in their hands. And, I mean, we've seen it happen to other drivers before where, there's just so much pressure to, I think, didn't this happen to Kimi, too?
I think so, yeah.
Kimi
There's a lot of pressure to perform well at your home race, and I think, especially as a rookie, like, it takes a lot from you from that weekend. But I think Gabby, his post-race interview was really mature, and I think that, a lot of the rookies this year have a good head on their shoulders.
Yeah, there's less of, like, blame, it feels like, or less of, I feel like there's a lot more ownership to, like, yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah, so. And they're like, I'm not going to blame anyone. Like, it is an incident. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So I quite like that. Because of that, a safety car ends up coming out at lap 2. We also see that Lewis does not have a front wing. and we're not quite sure what's going on. And it looks like Lewis was actually trying to pass Colapinto, and it came off, I believe.
Like, it almost looks like there was a little bit of contact, but basically it looked like his front wing, the way it hit, it almost clipped under the car. So he ended up driving over his own, like,
it was very
front
strange.
wing, which in turn caused floor damage. So that was confirmed by the team on the radio.
Yeah.
Like, a few laps later.
Well, and what originally happened, so he originally dropped on the order after being tagged by Carlos, before he actually then clipped the rear of Franco's car. So it was like a kind of being tapped by Carlos and then going into Franco. It was just like a whole ricochet effect. But yeah, he ended up limping back to the pit and getting a new front wing and everything, but then went back out.
And just was not confident.
It was just
in the car.
Suffering for the rest of the race for him.
Yeah.
Ollie ends up passing. Well, so the safety car is back in by lap 6, and there is a restart. Not the restarts that they do when the safety cars go in, but it's just like you can actually drive now. Ollie ends up passing George in a pretty ballsy move. Ollie has grown into one of my favorite drivers. I feel like his moves have been fantastic this season. Like, overall, a lot of props to him. Where am I? Gabby apparently actually crashed because Stroll did not leave him really any room around that turn, and it was pretty obvious. But like we said, Gabby didn't blame him.
Anyone.
And he was like, it's just a racing incident. So, props to him. So yeah, the safety car went in by lap 6. Oscar, Kimi, and Charles all go 3 wide into the first turn. And it was like, I feel like I couldn't breathe.
Oh, it was so stressful.
Oscar slightly, okay, so this is like the incident. Oscar is all the way on the inside. And then Kimmy's in the middle, and then Charles is on the outside. And there's a good amount of room between Kimi and Charles, but not really sure who was paying attention to what or whatever. But Oscar, it looks like he realized that he wasn't going to have enough room, and then he ends up locking up, and then Oscar ends up slightly hitting Kimi, because also Kimi didn't leave him any room, and then Kimi ends up hitting Charles, and then Charles spins out, loses a tire, like, it's a whole thing.
Yeah. So then we're under another yellow flag.
Yes. Well, and before the yellow flag comes up, as the crash is happening, we see Charles's tire fly up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like,
yeah,
because specifically the cars are made in a way where that's not supposed to be happening.
Yeah, I think it's only happened a handful of times prior since we've been watching, but basically, as we're watching this, because it happened in one of the first turns of the restart after the safety car,
typically we believe that
a lot of the pundits, like Jolly and Palmer, felt that this should just be summed up to a racing incident, because it is. It's 3 cars across. There's nowhere to go. At the end of the day, like, it was a tough situation, but the situation got Oscar under investigation.
And typically, like, these events, usually they will be under investigation, but normally, if it's a first lap or like a restart incident,
there'll be like no further review needed.
Yeah, and people will all agree that it was just a start racing incident. Not this time, which we'll get to that. Oscar now, because he kind of passed through, like he kind of skirted on through it. And so he ended up being in P2 after this whole thing. And so it's Lando P1, Oscar P2, and it's just kind of a bit of a shit show. The VSC comes out on lap 6 because of Charles, and it ended up going in by lap 9. During the VSC, there's a few people who go into the pit to get new tires. So Max goes in, he changes to a medium tire. I believe he was on a soft at first, and then he switched to a medium. And then now this restart, again, another restart happens, and Oscar and Lando are kind of battling. Like, I would say the pundits were hyping it up more than it actually was much of a battle. It was really Lando in front of Oscar, and Oscar, like, trying to catch up to Lando, but Lando walked away pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Which I will say, I don't know what is going on with Oscar. Because earlier in the year, when it was just like wheel-to-wheel racing between the two of them, it felt like Oscar had more confidence in the car.
It feels like the roles have reversed. It feels like Lando is, you can definitely tell there's a lot of confidence when he's interviewing. It feels like Oscar is just not there right now.
Like, I don't know what, maybe they had an upgrade
the stress,
on the car.
Who knows?
That, like, it just feels like it's not the same driver in the same car it was a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'd be saying this even, like, if you... Yeah, the success difference is a big thing, but, like, it even just, like, when he's battling against people, it doesn't feel like he is as comfortable making some, like, crazy
risky
moves.
Yeah.
And then when he does do those risky moves, I feel like recently it's been the cause for penalties or crashes.
Well, and I think maybe that's it. Maybe there's just, like, a second guessing, like, a lack of confidence.
That's true.
But.
Okay. So yeah, Max had changed to medium tires. Oscar and Lando were battling at the restart. Lap 9, Ocon goes into the pits. This is like really the beginning of some people going in to get tires changed, because a bunch of people started on softs, so now it's basically about time to change. Lap 12, we see George passing Hadjar for 4th place. George was doing a classic George race.
Yeah.
Nothing else to say there.
Yeah, and that's, at this point, I hope you would know what that means.
Yeah. And then we found out that Yuki got a 10-second time penalty for causing a collision with Lance Stroll. We did not even see this occur.
The pundits seemed shocked by it. Like, they didn't even understand.
Yeah, they were like, okay, we'll play the replay for y'all in a second.
And
I don't even remember what the replay was.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. The replay, it made no sense. Why he would get a 10-second time penalty for that.
Yeah. I felt like the penalties were definitely harsh during the race.
Yeah.
But.
And so when I said, because I remember watching it and being like, oh, that's really harsh for that. And then Mary Catherine was like, well, that makes me nervous for Oscar. And you were correct.
I was like, if they're giving that to Yuki, I was like, without a doubt, Oscar is about to get a 10-second
And
penalty.
I was like, no, it was a racing incident.
And I was like, no. I was like, the way they're moving right now, they don't work in mysterious ways. They work in the most obvious of ways.
That's true.
So.
Lap 13, Ollie Behrman ends up making a late-breaking move to pass Liam Lawson for 6th. Again, some of his really great moves this year. Lewis is now complaining about how unstable the car is.
He does not like his car. He's freaking out.
Lewis just wants this year to be done.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
He needs a long meditative trip.
Yeah. And then we find out that Oscar was given a 10-second time penalty for causing a collision at that restart with Charles and Kimi.
Ding.
Which was crazy. And almost every pundit agreed that made no sense.
We even heard from one of the drivers involved in the incident who felt it was too harsh after the race. So yeah, I understand where the conspiracy theories come from.
Because then you think about this stuff and you're like, well, like normally in other races that would have been considered a racing incident, and then like now it's going to be harder for Oscar to win that championship.
And it's one of the people that are one of the contenders. And so, yeah, I just feel like sometimes the FIA self-sabotages their image, which, I don't think they give two shits about.
If you hadn't done that, like if he hadn't gotten that 10-second time penalty, there's a chance that he would have been on the podium. And he would have been on the podium, most likely. And the point difference between him and Lando would not be as large as it is now. Which means that the championship fight would still be very intense. I mean, it still is, but like a 35-point difference or whatever it is now is very different than like a 20-point difference. Like that to me is like, okay, a 20-point difference. Like, that means that Lando could crash out and DNF the next race and Oscar could win.
Yeah.
And then Oscar would be ahead. Like, to me, I'm like, FIA, like, that was a racing incident and you did not need to, your choice made no sense.
Yeah.
You're ruining the fun. Okay. Lap 18, Ollie and Carlos both go into the pits. This is when we find out that Max is also already up to 9th place. Reminder, he started from the pit lane. They really wanted to remind us of that all weekend long.
Pit lane to podium. That's all they kept saying.
Yeah. Lap 19, Gasly and Hadjar both go into the pits. Hadjar comes out right behind Ollie and Esteban, so Isaac actually lost track position here. So Ollie and Esteban did a pretty good job there. Max is right behind Alex Albon, and I was surprised that Alex did not put much of a fight up, but yeah, Max just passed Alex pretty quickly inside turn 1, lap 21. Kimi finally goes into the pits at lap 22 to get rid of his soft tires. I think he only had a 1 stop, or maybe he had a 2 stop.
I honestly can't remember.
It's not that important, clearly. Ocon was struggling. Okay, so they started talking about how Esteban's been really struggling with the car, really, since Haas has made an update to the car. And Ollie has really thrived. So, yeah, they were just talking about that. Nothing else to say. I would agree with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just goes to show that, it's similar to moments where, like, with Max and Checo, where one driver would really thrive and the other wouldn't. I mean, I think we've seen it with Carlos and Alex. I think, unfortunately, Esteban is just struggling a lot more. I do think that Ollie's ability to move in a race is something that needs to be talked about more, because I also think at a certain point it is the way Ollie moves. Like, yeah. Ollie makes moves very well, and I'm consistently disappointed that it's not talked about more.
100%.
It does get shined upon, like, don't get me wrong, but I think, Esteban is kind of the Carlos Sainz of Haas right now, where he's still just trying to figure out the car.
Yeah.
It is year 1, hopefully next year's gonna be a lot different. And
I've been very happy for Haas this year. Like, overall, I think it's been a really good year for them.
Yeah, and I think him and Ollie work very well as, like, coworkers, as colleagues, and I'm happy to see this success of Haas, especially with the struggles that they've had in the past.
100%. Okay. So, Yuki served his 10-second time penalty, but did it incorrectly, apparently. And so then he got slapped with another 10-second time penalty for not serving his penalty correctly.
We've seen it before, not often, but we've seen it before.
I know, but it just hurts. Screws over the driver.
It hurts so much.
Because then it's like something the driver did to mess up.
It's basically a thrown away pit stop at that point.
Yeah, it's very upsetting.
So,
I actually think drive-through penalties are worse. Where, like, you're not even going into the pit.
Feel like shameful. Like, they feel like
it feels like sit in the corner, or like write on the chalk, like write your name on the
chalkboard a million times
in front of the whole class.
Yeah. Not that we ever had to do that.
No. Lewis got a 5-second penalty for causing a collision with Franco. What's up with the 10 and then the 5?
I don't know. I would love to know what the severity or what their, like, line in the sand is between a 5 and a 10.
Yeah. Lap 30, Lando is leading by 6.7 seconds from Oscar. And then behind them is George, Max, Kimi, Alex, Nico, Ollie, Isaac, and Pierre. And several still have not pit yet. That order changed a lap later when Lando ends up going in to make a stop. He comes back on track in 4th place behind Max with used soft tires on. Max's tires were 25 laps old, so he didn't really put much of a fight up, so he let Lando just right through. Lap 38, we see Oscar go into the pit because Max was starting to catch up. I think they were trying to do a one stop, but Max was catching up, and so like the timing of it was just wasn't gonna work.
Yeah.
So he ends up going in. He comes back out behind Max, and in seventh, Oscar had switched to softs. Oscar did ask what the plan was at this point because he was like, "So what are we doing, guys?" Because it seems pretty bleak from my point of view.
Yeah.
And they responded back saying that they're trying to undercut George and Ollie, and Max will help him with that. So, yeah. Lap 43, Ollie goes into the pits. Ollie had a pretty bad pit stop of 3.9 seconds, so that was just not great, but it's fine. Lap 49, Ollie ends up trying to get past Hulkenberg, and it is a tight squeeze, and he does get past him and moves up to P7. Lap 51, we see Lando go in for his last pit stop, and he comes out in third. Oscar was told to go into the pit at lap 52. He comes out in seventh behind Ollie. Hadjar and Stroll are battling a bit, and it was a little bit shaky at one point. Like, it almost looked like one of them was going to go off track, but they were okay. And Hadjar ends up passing Stroll, and so does Gasly, because he was kind of right behind them during all of this, and so he snuck on through. Oscar's trying to pass Ollie, and eventually he does get to it by lap 54, so he moves up to sixth. Lap 54, Max is told to box, and Max comes out right ahead of Liam Lawson and Oscar Piastri. Oscar passed Liam Lawson around lap 56 with about 3 seconds between him and Max now, and I was hoping that Oscar was going to catch up to Max.
Yeah.
But I believe Max had put on softs, and Oscar was on mediums, so the softs were just going to be a lot easier for him to go faster.
Yeah, Max had more sets of new softs than anyone else that he was fighting against because of his knockout in the earlier qualifying session. So he had just basically newer tires that he could utilize.
Mercedes is telling Kimi to keep the pace and the tires okay because Max is coming, but they have 12 laps left of the race, so they obviously are not going to stop now. Lap 63, Max ends up passing George for third place. Oscar is about 2.5 seconds behind George, but George actually has ailing brakes, like his brakes are failing for some reason. And so the hope was that Oscar was going to be able to catch up. Max was about 1.4 seconds from Kimi at this point. And so really the last bit of the race was just us watching those two battles to see if Max could catch up to Kimi and if Oscar could catch up to George. There was also, I would say, from Liam Lawson, who was in 8th or something, back. It was basically just one DRS train.
Yeah, it was
crazy.
Crazy to see them come in to the finish line.
Eventually Max was in DRS range of Kimi and Oscar was in DRS range of George. And they didn't end up getting to pass in the end. The finishing order, let me go through it. P1 was Lando, P2 Kimi, P3 Max, P4 George, P5 Oscar, P6 Ollie, P7 Liam, P8 Isaac, P9 Nico, P10 Pierre, P11 Alex, P12 Esteban, P13 Carlos, P14 Fernando, P15 Franco, P16 Lance, P17 Yuki, and then DNF Lewis, DNF Charles, and DNF Gabby. So that is the race. Let's get into our final thoughts. Thoughts?
I mean, I think that the Drivers' Championship is still 1,000% up in the air.
Yeah.
I think that there is always an opportunity for absolute insanity. I just hope that Oscar's team and camp really, tries to stick to positivity. Because I feel like, there's just a lack of confidence, it feels like, in comparing Oscar, but it's funny because I feel like they've just kind of flip-flopped emotions as the season has gone on.
It's been very weird.
Oscar was on this high confidence where Lando was just I make stupid mistakes. I just keep making mistakes. I
feel like I'm not even hearing from Oscar.
And then whereas this, I feel like I've heard very few, I mean, not that we were really hearing a lot from him. He's not a guy of 1,000 words, but yeah, it's just, I think I'm surprised at how off it all seems from his side of the garage.
Well, and people are trying to compare this to last year with Lando, where like it was Lando's first time getting really close to getting the championship, and then he ended up not in the end. And then now Oscar's pretty close to it, and people are saying he might not. They seem like very different situations to me. I think it's hard to compare them when, like, I think even the attitudes between the two drivers are very different.
I
And
mean,
like the
I think
positions that
it's
they're in.
I think it's completely different experiences, right? Like I think what happened last year was so drastically different, so exciting seeing someone who wasn't a Red Bull and wasn't Max,
Yeah.
winning, and someone finally competing against, this unstoppable force. Whereas, this season is just very, it feels like a very soft ball of an experience, if that makes sense, where like everything's a little underwhelming, or like the emotions don't seem like, you don't have these Lewis Max level of emotions where
I'm kind of okay with.
Yeah, and so I think that's why it feels so much more like subdued. But yeah, I'm curious to see how it's going to end. I think Oscar's in his third season. This is a driver that I see being on the grid for quite a long time, and I don't see this being the only chance he's going to have. Cuz that's a big conversation that a lot of people have, is that this could be the only time that Lando.
I mean, it is valid, though.
Yes, but you can say that about anything,
Yeah.
And so I think that they're both two really strong drivers. I think that they're, shaping up to have, if they haven't already, to have even better careers. So yeah, I think that I don't know how it's going to end. I think there's going to be a disappointed emotion regardless of who it is. I'm going to feel sad for whoever doesn't.
Yeah. I think right now the race that I'm interested in seeing their performance in is Vegas.
Yeah.
I think Vegas is the wild card here, where we really have no idea who's going to perform better. Is it going to be Oscar or Lando?
Yeah.
And I mean, do you remember Lando's crash 2 years ago in Vegas?
Well, and how is the car going to perform? It's so cold. Like, how is, and Vegas, in my opinion, is like the worst schedule for spectators and drivers and teams.
It's horrible.
It's like this, I mean, the fact that the weekend warm up for us is like, I think 1 a.m. or something crazy like that. And so, yeah, I think the next 3 races are going to be, it's a triple header to end the season, which is insane.
I know.
The final sprint weekend is happening in one of these final 3 races.
It's in Qatar.
So yeah, I think it's a lot of points up for grabs and a lot of pressure, and I think it's gonna be intense. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that we've been saying this for weeks now, probably months. I think everyone's tired and is ready they're ready for the season to be done.
Oh, and this is the last 3 to do this to the schedule is like cruel. Like it feels like we're gonna get drama because people are just all sleep deprived because their bodies are so out of whack. And because they've been traveling so much for 14 days.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's gonna be an interesting ending. I think, I'm happy for McLaren for how far they've come so fast. But it is a little sad that it's like teammate versus teammate. But they always say that your biggest rival is your teammate. So
yeah, I don't know. I'm just interested to kind of see what happens. I feel like it's hard to. I mean, we can't predict what's going to happen. I mean, you can't ever count Max out somehow.
No.
Like, somehow he could still win
does
this.
it all.
I don't know if mathematically he could still win it.
Look what he did today. Never say never. I mean, GP couldn't even believe what he was saying over the radio. So
I mean, I'm not surprised.
No.
It's Max. He did basically the same thing last year.
And he was furious. Exiting at Q1, you knew he was furious.
Oh, 100%. I mean, Yas walked away off camera. Okay. I think it was a good weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited for the next race, Vegas. Not really excited for that as a whole, but wish it was somewhere else.
Yeah.
But excited for another race. And fingers crossed something crazy happens, because I think it will.
Yeah.
I could see, like, Lewis Hamilton somehow winning it.
Hopefully. Oh, my God.
That would be crazy. That would be crazy.
We all our mental health needs it. Anyways.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, follow us on everything, do all the things. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.